Going live. Hey, folks. Welcome to the program, which will start in about 4.5 minutes. Glad to have you here tonight. And I got kids that are going to be making noise, so I'm trying to keep that to a minimum. It's bedtime, and everybody is being rebellious. And, of course, I got to start radio, and Rainey's out. So she'll be back pretty soon. Hopefully, we won't have too many interruptions. Hey, Brianna. Steve Clark, good to see you. By the way, Steve, if you weren't here on Sunday, there it is. It came. We have not opened it yet. We're going to have an official opening and get that baby tasted. That is some blueberry moonshine sent by Steve. Where is my headset? Somebody take my black headset off my desk. Up there. Somebody did. Hold on. I need it for radio. Then why isn't it right here where it always sits? That's my household, guys. Nobody did it. Nobody took it, of course. So I have no headset tonight. Hopefully I won't get any feedback. I need somebody to think long and hard about the headset. All right. It's about as good as it gets around here. I'm going to have to turn my sound way down so I can't hear it. Boom, boom, boom. I got to see. Okay, it's working over there. We got 2 minutes and we're going live. So, all right, guys, that's it. It's bedtime. There should be no arguing up there, no fighting, no nothing. Let's go. Let's get it done. I don't care. You know what time it is. You're not dumb. That's the stuff, folks. I'm glad we're in our pre-show. It's in about 1.5 minutes. I won't be able to say anything like that to anybody. So welcome over there in the chat room. Grumpy Stack is lurking. Barbie D is here. Leslie Holker is here. And Barbie D, Leslie, I'm looking at everybody's in. Deborah Sloan, good to see you, Deborah. That's if you're not here on a regular basis, that's what goes on here in the background most of the time. That's why this became a weird kind of family show in a weird way. Everybody, let's go. I got a minute. I'm folding the curtain, eating something still, whatever the excuse is. Let's go, guys. It's time. Stairs. Because it's always fighting. It's always about fighting. It's how much you can fight. All right, guys, we got about 25 seconds, and we're going to start the show. Remember, if you're new to the chat room, I'll go dark for a few seconds, and then the show will start. So here we go. See you in a few.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the program. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And that's ODYSY radio.com, OdysseyRadio.com. Go on over and check out all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio, what's going on over there, all the shows over there, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can listen audibly only over on the radio station at Odyssey Radio. Just click on the stream over there. Or if you're live tonight with us, you can watch this show in its video format or in two different ways. Go over to Facebook/Odyssey Radio. So Odyssey Radio's Facebook page, and you'll see the video on this, and you'll see a chat room there. But most of the chatting tends to go on over here, where I am right now on the YouTube channel. So you can go to youtube.com/Scotty Roberts, and you'll catch the Intrepid Radio program there in video and audio, and you can join the chat room. If you want, you can listen audibly over at the at Odyssey Radio. Listen to the Audible on Odyssey, and just come on over here, join the chat room. All the fellow Intrepids are already joining. I'm pointing over there because that's where the chat room appears on my screen. And enjoy the show that way. Join in the conversation. And also, you can join this channel on my YouTube channel. That has nothing to do with Odyssey Radio, but that does have to do with this show, which broadcasts on Odyssey Radio. Come on over right below the screen here where you see me and all this stuff all over my screen. Just click on there's a little join button down at the bottom somewhere beneath the screen. You can join. You can see there's 3 different ways to join when you click on that. So you can take care of that and come in at whatever level you'd like. And so I'm happy that you are here today. I got to put on my glasses. Those of you just listening to the audio stream can't see that. But that's like me talking in the chat room, and I can't see the chat room without my glasses on. So I want to thank you all for being here. I hope you had a good weekend up here in the Great White North in Wisconsin. We're outside of the Twin Cities by about 45 minutes to an hour. Gives you an idea of our location. Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And out in the country here, sort of, a town in the country. And it's just getting to be nice. Now, I looked at the weather forecast, by the way, if you live in this area. It's in the 50s now. All the snow's gone, but it's going to be in the 30s all through the weekend. Thursday through at least Sunday is what I saw. So it's going to get cool again. Ryan Gale, good to see you, brother, over there in the chat room. Steve Clark, good to see you. Deborah Sloan, so glad you're here. Brianna Learman, good to see you. And Leslie Holker, good to see you. Barbie D, great to see you. And who else is in here tonight so far? That might be it so far. The crowd is building. Roger Rabbit is here. How you doing, Roger? Grumpy Stack is here. I got to go back a little ways, scrolling backwards to see who all is in here. If I missed you, it's only because I can't do a full roll call all the time. But I'm sure glad that you're here. Yeah, I hope they're wrong too, Leslie. I would like it to be 50s and 60s and even into the 70s. When it starts getting into the 80s, too hot for my blood because I'm hot-blooded. Check it and see. Something like that. When is it that the heat hurts you? When you're hot-blooded or when you're cold-blooded? That's not a beer. It should be. That's just a soda because I need a little caffeine to keep myself wrong. I keep taking these on and off. I don't know why. Don't need to. These aren't my styling glasses, by the way, for those of you watching the video. These are my drawing glasses, my art glasses, my read my computer glasses, my design on my computer glasses. And but you get to see them for the purpose of this alone. I had these made especially so I can read my computer screen at this distance. So I want to thank you all for being here again, putting up with my frivolities, my stuff. And by the way, I just want to mention that Rainey has her, remember, Squatch tumblers, where she makes all of this kind of stuff, and all different kinds of tumblers, hundreds of them, designs. Squatch, she changed the name. It was always a clunky name to say, a clunky name for people to spell. Now she has Two Loons Massage, so she just brought out Two Loons Tumblers. So what was Squatch Tumblers is now, as you can see by the logo, I got to go in a different direction. That logo up there in the corner, twoloonstumblers.com will get you to Rainey's stuff. And she's building and building and building. So if it seems like, we've got friends of ours in radio on this station that have their own tumbler stuff going on. It all we were all talking initially about a year ago of launching a company together, and then it just went quiet, and Rocky launched his with Lisa, and it's Lisa's company. She's working it, and we launched this one right about the same time, separately from each other. So if that seems confusing, it's not really too confusing. We're just all kind of doing the same thing and hitting different things. So there you go. That's why the logo's different, Field Guy says in the chat room, and welcome to the chat room. There are so many jokes I heard yesterday, I missed out on typing. Are you talking about the Sunday morning show, Field Guy? You talking about jokes or lots of things, entendres that you could comment on? It's kind of funny. Hey, Uncle Dave Potter. Good to see you. Uncle Dave is here, everybody, in the chat room. The Sunday show, for those of you who don't go over there or haven't been there, it's not an official show of Odyssey Radio. We could make it that, but we'd have to conduct ourselves a little differently. Sunday show is just It's Sunday with Scotty and Rainey. And Rainey sometimes can make good long appearances. Sometimes she just can pop in. Sometimes she's not here at all. But it was a Sunday show we started a couple of years ago, where we just spend a couple of hours on Sunday morning and have coffee and talk, and it's very informal. Doesn't broadcast on the radio station. But if you want to join us on Sundays, it's 9 a.m. Central Time every Sunday morning. And sometimes it gets merry in there for a morning. I'd like to get Rainey here for an evening show where maybe we are testing Steve Clark's Blueberry Shine, which is in this box here. And if you missed it yesterday and today, I already showed this off. This box came in from Steve Clark, and it's full of Blueberry Shine that will be very soon cracking open that box and giving it a test. But we want to do it on the show. So it's either going to be during one of the shows or it's going to be on Sunday. But I don't like to drink a lot on Sunday morning as far as alcohol goes. So we'll see. Maybe we'll do a special time with that one. Captain's Cabin in an after show or something. So Matthew Sainsbury, welcome to the program. Good to see you. And folks, last week we started talking about Avalon, Glastonbury Tour. If you haven't been there, you need to put that on your bucket list as a place to go, especially if you're into British history, if you're into mystical Britain, if you're into the Arthurian cycles, the Arthurian legends, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Merlin and Morgaine and all of those characters. Lancelot was one of the characters. Lancelot du Lac, Lancelot of the Lake. As Dave even pointed out last time we were talking about this on Friday, is that character, Lancelot du Lac, that is a character that hails his name from the lake. Now, there's another lake in France they say it was from, but he was also part of this lake that was the lake around the Isle of Avalon, which was around Glastonbury Tor at one time. If you travel to Glastonbury Tor now, it's not a lake anymore with these, there's 7, 8, or 9 big hills there that were islands in this big lake. And they called it the Lake Country. And that lake is gone. This was in antiquity. We're talking Arthurian legend, the 400s to the 500s AD. So you're talking 1500, 1600 years ago. And by the way, let me say on that, if you see a version of King Arthur with the knights in the shining armor and on jousting and all, that hadn't happened yet. That was not the kind of armor they wore in those days. That's just the storybook version of all of that. Michelle Canham McFree is here. Good to see you, Michelle. Glad you made it in. And so you go over there today to Glastonbury Tor, and you can see what's called now the Avalon Marshes that are around that region of the lake. And the town of Glastonbury is very much geared to the spirituality there. Some of it, I think, is more modern and maybe a bit of an artifice. I don't want to down anybody in particular, but it's become kind of a pagan, Wiccan ghetto section of the countryside. And this town is especially geared to it because of the history of Glastonbury and Glastonbury Tor. And you know what I mean by that. You've got, like we used to say of pagans, there are some pagans that are genuine. That's their religion. We have our friend Travis Thorpe, who is a pagan high priest. And there's a reason for that. It's something that is part of his religion. It is ingrained in him. It is who he is. It's his spirituality. Then you've got what we used to call the acorn shakers of the week, meaning they like to hug an oak tree and shake down the acorns. And they're in rebellion against their parents' Presbyterianism or something like that. And so, we'll show you, we'll become pagans. And there's those kinds of pagans too. And then there's pagans who run shops and pagans who do services for people and stuff like that. So it's good stuff. So get to Glastonbury Tor. Get to England. It's not all that expensive. Well, maybe right now it is because of fuel prices. But when I went, we spent and we had 4 people together. 2 of my buddies and one of my buddies' wives, and same guy buddy that came along, by the way. It wasn't 3 buddies and somebody else's wife. That would make an interesting trip, eh? But we rented a car for 2 weeks and we went over there. The last time I was there was 2005, and we just pub hopped and castle hopped. We flew over. It was about $500 to fly over to Heathrow and back round trip. And it was roughly $400 to rent the car for a week. 2 weeks, something like that. Well, at least maybe that was per person. Can't remember. But we just stopped. We stayed all bed and breakfasts, and it was a great trip for relatively smaller amounts of money than you might think. Don't let money get in the way of doing the things that you want to do, because it's like my Mark Twain quote, my mantra for life. 20 years from now, you'll regret more the things you didn't do than the things you did do. So cast off from the safe harbor. Set your sails to the trade winds. Explore, dream, discover. Do it while you can, before there's not time to do it or the inability to do it. Don't go traveling when because you can't adventure the same. Well, I take that back. There's a lot of older people that travel. Not saying you can't travel when you're older. Saying when you're younger, put that on your bucket list and make it happen. It's not that hard to do. And if you don't do it now, you'll come 20 years from now and regret the fact that you didn't do it 20 years ago. So don't let that be your situation. So get there. That's one of the places. And I got many other places I want to go to. I want to get back to Glastonbury. I want to take Rainey to Glastonbury Tor. And, of course, other places over there in England and Scotland and Ireland. So we'll do it again. And 20 years from now, Scotty, I won't care, said Barbie D. Well, that's it. 20 years from now, you might not care. 20 years from now, though, you could have the memories. There it is. So, stoned and drunk, what kind of show could come out of it? Says Steve Clark. We've done that on this show, haven't we? Stoned and drunk. And I think it was a pretty good show. I can't do that again though until I have my son Sam the leprechaun back in the seat next to me. So maybe I should have him over to test some of that shine. Steve Clark. All right. Leslie Hoker says, I'm like my papa. There's no place like home. That's great too. Home is always there. By travel, doing things on your bucket list, you don't have to give up home. That's a nice thing. You can go travel and then you always got home. You can go home. And so that's the wonderful thing about it. I love to travel. I'd travel all the time if I could. There are certain things right now that prevent me from doing that. 3 little kids. We don't have the ability to travel like we'd like to. And so that has become the narrative of our lives. Is we're parents, we're homebodies, we take care of our kids, and hopefully soon we'll be able to find ways more and more over the next year, 2 years, 3 years to start doing a little more traveling. And I know there is also that factor that if you travel a lot, home becomes that little apartment or something that you go back to. For some people, if you do a lot of travel, I like to do a lot of travel. I'd like to have a great home base and build that up. We'd like to have some acres and do some things like my house. And then you think 20 years from now, I'll be 81 years old. How much of that can I do in 20 years? If I live to 104, as I've predicted, what are my years going to be like when I get up there? I don't know yet. So I want to do that while I'm still relatively young, even though I'm getting older. So we started talking last week about Glastonbury Tour. We drifted over into the Avalon legends, how Glastonbury Tour is considered to be the gateway to the netherworld. And there's a spiritual hum about the place. It's palpable there. And they say that the hill of Glastonbury is also, fictionally, they've written about it, like Marion Zimmer Bradley in The Mists of Avalon, that the two places occupy the same space in different dimensions. You've got, and it wasn't a science fiction-y thing, it was a magical thing. It's where if you had the ability and knew the spells, you could part the mist at Glastonbury on the lake, and you would see the Isle of Avalon in its place, where the priestesses of Avalon dwelt. And so talking about these narratives that we make for ourselves, there is, and frankly, other people make for us sometimes too. The title of tonight's show, which is an extension of last Friday and last Thursday, and there's the master narrative of Morgaine of Avalon. And I put down here, master narratives are ultimately connected to our identity. And the union of the stories that we tell and others tell about ourselves is what makes ourself. And so I started talking last week about this whole master narrative that existed with the Arthurian legend, with Morgaine of Avalon. How she has come down to be, if you ask officially if they know anything about the Arthurian legends at all, Arthur, King Arthur, the Round Table, Merlin the Wizard, and you had Morgan Le Fay, as some of the older legends called her. She became this evil enchantress that was trying to destroy her brother's kingdom. And that's one of the narratives that developed out. She became somebody who was no longer the person that she probably really was in the legends, and she took on this narrative in correlation to the times in which the stories originally were told. And so we all know these stories. King Arthur, the hero, he brought peace and prosperity to a formerly violent Britain. And there's a rough time determining whether he was real, a real man, or a myth. but there's a lot of evidence that starts pointing to the places that are associated with his legend, Glastonbury being one of them. There's a lot of things about the man himself. And it's kind of come down and boiled down to this. Arthur was like a Welsh clan chieftain who unified the other clans and the other little kingdoms. There were little kingdoms spotted all over Britain, and he unified them under one great high king. That was what he was supposed to be. And Morgan Le Fay, as we knew her in the stories, was the woman who betrayed him. She was his half-sister. We also know that his wife, Guinevere, King Arthur's wife, betrayed him with his best friend, Lancelot. I saw in the writings of Mary Stuart, The Crystal Cave, The Hollow Hills, and The Last Enchantment, her books on the Arthurian legends, also very wonderful books to read. She said Bedwer, I think was the name, Bedwer, if I remember the name right. That's coming from like 25, 30 years ago that I read that. But he was the closest character she could find in her research historically to a Lancelot. So you have Lancelot, Bedwer, and Guinevere and Morgan. Morgan, by the way, is a more anglicized name for Morgan Le Fay. You've got the Welsh name Morgaine, which I prefer in some of the older legends. And so Guinevere and Morgan are specific forms of a wider master narrative. And this is kind of where we ended last week. That's familiar to us. Women as temptresses. Both of these women were unwitting accomplices in an evil that befell King Arthur, which Guinevere often is accused of the very womanliness. Her very womanliness is blamed for his seduction. Or they intentionally destroy men, as Morgan did, Morgan Le Fay, by seducing Arthur and giving birth to Mordred. She's his half-sister, and they had sex together, and they had a child, and Mordred was the man that grew up, and she groomed him to destroy Arthur's kingdom. Now, the reason I've seen the narrative changed. If you look at Marion Zimmer Bradley's book, The Mists of Avalon, she took that narrative and tried to peel back the layers of mythology and storytelling and fairy tale and get down to who these people may have really been. And she told the story through the eyes of these women who in the 5th century, when they were originally conceived in mythology, let me put it this way, conceived, that means they were made up. We don't know if they were made up, but they were originally written down in mythology. They started to become more evil characters, or more the products of the master narrative of 5th century Britain. And that master narrative said that women are to be subdued, women are to keep quiet, but women are also, if they're beautiful, they're temptresses. They're the cause of all the evil between men. And so women temptresses, that motif functions in this way. It's reinforcing the whole patriarchal value that women are less morally capable than men. All of you listening, you in the chat room, do you believe yourself, if you are a woman, are you less morally capable than a man? As such, it seems that the King Arthur myth functions as an oppressive master narrative, at least where the women are concerned. And these master narratives, now try to pull some of this into current day, try to pull some of it into yourself. Do you believe there is a master narrative about who you are? Master narrative here in the 21st century. Master narratives are ultimately connected to a person's identity. And what's identity? It's the union of the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And it's the stories others tell us about ourselves. Do you have anybody out there who tells you a story about who you are or who they think you are supposed to be? Does it tie into the narrative you have about yourself? There are some people, when we were talking about self-esteem a couple of weeks ago, that's the stuff that forms our esteem about ourselves. If we believe the narrative about ourselves, whether it's positive or negative, if we believe the narrative and latch that narrative from somebody else, what does other people tell us we are, and we link it into our own narratives, we become that thing. And so what's identity? It's this union of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and the stories that others tell us about ourselves and perhaps promulgate to other people about us. So some of those narrative constructions are borrowed from master narratives in the story of Morgaine and of Guinevere and the other women in the Arthurian legend. When a person borrows from an oppressive master narrative, her identity reflects that. So, for example, if part of a woman's identity consists of the woman as a temptress motif, in the case that she is raped, she might believe that she brought it on herself because she's a woman, therefore a woman is a temptress. Where have we heard this? This narrative exists, I'm sorry to say, it exists in biblical scriptures. The woman is temptress. The woman is something that brings this stuff on herself. And you have to be the virtuous woman to pull yourself out of that narrative. Other people who buy into women as temptresses believe the same thing. And that's important because, again, a person's identity is made up not only of their understanding of themselves, but others' understanding of who they are. Who I am depends to some extent on who others will let me be. And this master narrative like that of the woman as temptress serves to justify the oppression that you see in the story of Morgaine. And maybe in our own lives, to a certain extent, there's a good lesson to be learned here. Hey, Max over in the chat room. Good to see you coming in. Leslie says, I don't need to tell myself stories about myself. I'm really quite fascinating. Boom, there it is. That is your master narrative about yourself. And that's a good thing. I can listen to Deborah Sloan says, I will be in no box. Boom. Absolutely. And so these are the things we need to tell ourselves. And sometimes the narratives that other people tell, the master narrative out there, isn't so. So don't incorporate the things that aren't so into who you are. Marion Zimmer Bradley, in The Mists of Avalon, offers what we now see as a counter story for the women of King Arthur, who are subjected to the harmful narratives of the 5th century Britain. Master narratives are what created these characters in the motif that we see them or have understood them in all the fairy tales and the mythologies and the legends. Marion Zimmer Bradley came along and said, I'm going to flip that on its ear. I'm going to create a counter story. Now, that goes on today. It goes on in politics. It goes on in lives of people around us. It goes on in our lives. If there is a master narrative out there, excuse me, about who you might be or who you are, and you know that your master narrative is different than that, you have the ability to create the counter story. I'm going to counter that master narrative by doing this and becoming this and being this. Now, Marion Zimmer Bradley doesn't reduce Guinevere and Morgan to temptresses, but rather she reimagines them in more sympathetic terms. And that's not to say her characters are saints, but that's the point. By giving the women characters a voice in her narrative, she humanized them. And in doing so, she offers a counter story to the oppressive woman as temptress master narrative. Look at the story in the Bible of King David. And when we did that series on King David, the true life story of an invented hero, was what we called that. And look at the women in his life. Look at Bathsheba, who he had an affair with. They had a child, and the prophet of God said the child would die before it's 7 days old. Boom, this all happens. Who is Bathsheba? What do we know about Bathsheba? She is a temptress. It said she was bathing on her roof, or she was bathing in her courtyard, and David saw her from his roof. You think she didn't know she was inside of the palace and the king's terrace up there? She knew what she was doing. Was she tempting him? Yeah. Did he fall for it? Yeah. Did he engage in it? Yeah. He was just as much to blame as she was. But there was the counter story to the story of Bathsheba as being the temptress. The counter story is that she was a real person. You humanize her, and you see a very different side of that story. So perhaps the master narrative that hurts Morgaine the most is that which dictated the strict definition of beauty in the 5th century Britain. Women who were thought beautiful typically had fair hair and skin, and they were tall, whereas Morgaine is petite and dark. She's very Pictish, if you will, in the British Isles. And it would seem that the reason paleness was so praiseworthy had to do with the fact that women who had such a feature were most often indoors. They stayed at home out of the sun. And the master narrative of patriarchy states that a woman's place is within the home. And thus it would be logical that women who had pale skin had it because they never left home, and they would be the most desirable women of all because they stayed home and learned how to sew and cook and take care of the castle or the hovel, whatever it was you lived in 5th century. Leslie says, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's very true. That does not mean we don't have standards. We have individual eyes of the beholder. Look at our society, our culture today. What are the things that define beauty? We let Hollywood determine that for us. Now, I'm not talking this is everybody thinks this same way. I'm just saying there is a narrative that exists that's in place for what beauty is supposed to be. Same in the 5th century. The oppressive master narratives that affect Guinevere, the most I deal with women's roles and relationships. Women in patriarchal master narratives are not considered to be moral agents. And one example of this manifests itself in the marriage process. A highborn girl is always retained under the auspices of the male authority. And so first her father's, then her husband's. Who here doth give this bride away? Her mother and I, says the father. Nowadays, if you go traditional in a wedding ceremony, giving the bride away. What happened to the woman being her own agent? This is all archaic stuff that we still practice. These little tendrils of these things hang on. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying it's a tradition to say something like that. But there was a day where that meant something. Why do even still today, in marriage, women take on the man's name? Now, there might be a woman who says, I do that because I love him and I want to take on his name. But do you realize where that came from? It was a property thing. You would take on the man's name because he now owns you. So there's a lot of little tendrils of things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking down tradition and things like that. I'm just saying sometimes you have to look at what we see as simple little wonderful, lovely traditions that have come out in current day. They're not law anymore. They're not bound by that, but it is something that came from something much older and much harsher and much stricter than we have now. So, both women, Morgaine and Guinevere. Well, Guinevere especially, she was under her husband's protection. She's expected to remain sexually available to him, and only to him. Love for a man who's not her husband is usually punished severely. If you look at the Camelot legends, even the musical of Camelot, what was the big thing that tore Arthur's kingdom apart? The fact that Guinevere fell in love with Lancelot. They were caught, and the law said she had to be put to death because look at Henry VIII. What did he use to try to put Anne Boleyn to death? That she was having an affair with her Italian secretary or something like that. Her secretary, her musician, something like that. And the king could put her to death. It was considered treason. She was his property. That's what the tendrils of all that stuff filter into current day stuff, even though we just look at it as tradition. So fortunately, Morgaine had been exposed to a counter story in Avalon, an isle off the coast of Britain, in the lake of Avalon, where women worshipped a mother goddess and they took on leadership roles. Spirituality, suppressed or expressed in visions, was encouraged there. So Morgaine's ability was embraced, and she became a high priestess eventually of Avalon. Goddess worship in itself carried dynamics not found in Christian worship. In Christianity, women serve a male god, but the women of Avalon learned to accept their womanhood for what could be so wrong with it if their very goddess was a female. So certainly the goddess wasn't ashamed of her femaleness. Why should mortal women then be ashamed of their being born female? They're born in the goddess's image, according to Marion Zimmer Bradley and the Priestesses of Avalon. They were taught to feel shame about having a female body in 5th century Britain AD. That was the traditional master narrative in the 5th century AD. The first woman, Eve, in the Bible, had cast humankind out of paradise. Thus, Christians took that to mean that all women would be easily tempted into evil and would be more predisposed toward tempting men, the woman as temptress motif. Not so in Avalon. And this is the counter story that was created. As for beauty, in Avalon, little emphasis was placed on appearance. There was no particular set of features was valued over others. The priestesses dressed in simple robes. All in all, the women of Avalon were introduced to conceptions of womanhood, spirituality, and beauty that weren't available on mainland Britain, that allowed them a greater sense of power. And this worldview undermined traditional master narratives by providing women in alternative situations, more positives in a way of looking at themselves. This is flip-flopping the master narrative. And how much of that master narrative of 5th century Britain do you think still we have tendrils of today? That was the whole women's movement was based on those narratives. Now, I think the women's movement can take things a little too far. I think there are extremists in everything. And I think recognizing where things come from. My wife Rainey took my last name, as we were mentioning a few minutes ago. That comes from male ownership of women, especially dating it back, for the Arthurian legend's sake, to 5th century Britain. That's where that stems from. That's where that came from. So even though we show that we follow the traditions today, sometimes we don't think of why we do that. So despite all of this, Morgaine, the situation she was in, being a priestess of Avalon, growing up in Avalon, having the women priests, the women in power positions and so on, she couldn't shake the oppressive nature of the master narrative concerning beauty, especially. It becomes all the more important to her when she falls in love with Lancelot in Bradley's book, who seems interested in her as well. That is, until he meets Guinevere, a woman who certainly fit the blonde-haired, blue-eyed standard of beauty in Britain. By the way, Guinevere, I've got it up in front of me here. There's a Welsh spelling of that she uses in her book. Gwen for Gwen, Hwyfar for Hifar. So Guinevere. And that's the old archaic spelling of the name. And so the identity constituting narrative that Morgaine attacked beauty, lacked beauty, was formed in this legend. And this torments her throughout the novel. It affects her sense of self. And it's the only narrative that forces her to think of herself in any kind of negative terms at all, is this existing master narrative of 5th century Britain. And thus Morgaine's identity was influenced by 3 factors: her acceptance of her womanhood, acceptance of the sight, as they called it, their ability to see, their ability to, you could call it psychic ability, mediumship, magic. So her acceptance of possessing the sight, and self-loathing due to her appearance. So for the first 2, she was exposed to counter stories that allowed her to value these aspects of herself. The women of Avalon had identified the oppressive master narratives and gave the pagan women a healthier sense of their self. They also tried their hardest to bring that counter story into the rest of Britain, but to no avail. And for for a counter story to be optimally successful, it has to be embraced by the dominant group in society. So those from Avalon never reached that point. However, they did repair the damaged narrative of the women who came to Avalon from Christian Britain. And even Morgaine eventually repaired her damaged identity. After living outside of Avalon for years, she finally adopted the counter story that Avalon had supported all along. She was beautiful enough, even though she did not conform to the standards of the rest of Britain's traditional standards of beauty. I think this is a really neat thing about Marion Zimmer Bradley's book. When you think about it, it makes you think about the things that we have held on to for years, the standards of master narratives. Look at it in politics. Look at our master narratives that are going. What's the counter story now to the master narrative going on? It's worth thinking about. Guinevere's identity is in part influenced by Lancelot. She lived in a convent the day she met him. When she crossed into Avalon through the mists, right away, it's clear that Lancelot will tug at her traditional Christian loyalties. So by the time that she, and by the way, in the book, she crosses over accidentally. She's not there because she wanted to go there or for any reason. I don't think she even believed it existed. So by the time that she and Lancelot meet again, Guinevere's already become much more affected by oppressive master narratives than Morgaine ever was. She internalized the value of patriarchal Britain. And we see that her father is fond of calling her demeaning names, that he expects her to serve him. And she comes to judge herself as negatively as her father does. See, we adopt those master narratives about who we are, especially when our minds are younger. And yet, for spending time with the charming Lancelot, Guinevere begins to feel more empowered. For the first time, she felt pretty and bold and brave, it said in the book. It's clear that both have feelings for the other, but her father won't hear of a marriage between them. Part of the patriarchal master narrative makes women the property of men. And at that time, Guinevere was literally the property of her father, to be used to make alliances through arranged marriages. He's ambitious. He plans for her to marry Arthur, and so dismisses her fear of such a marriage. And in the end, he fully conceives or convinces her that he's doing it for her own good, and that she thus has no reason to complain. So as a result of his constant patronizing, Guinevere learns to dismiss her own feelings when they conflict with those of the powerful men in her life or the master narratives they uphold. She also comes to see herself through others' eyes. Rather than define her herself, she allows others' interpretation of her to predominate. Leslie Holker says it's been deliberate. Divide us through politics, race, sexuality, and all of a sudden, we're not the United States of America. Divided we fall. This is the master narrative that's been thrust on us in our politics and in our culture today. Without social and material support, women are at the mercy of society's master narratives, especially in this story in 5th century Britain. Morgaine has found such support in Avalon, but Guinevere has not. She's forced to leave the convent despite her wishes. She's forced into a marriage with a stranger, Arthur, despite her wishes. Furthermore, the narrative of women she learned while in the convent exists simultaneously with those that she learns in her father's household. So after so they legitimate so that they legitimate and reinforce each other. Legitimize, I suppose, is a better way to say that. So this is the most easily seen in Guinevere and her self-talk as she tries to stifle her anger at the fact that she's helpless to decide her own fate. It comes out like this in Marion Zimmer Bradley's book. She says she wanted to be a nun and stay in the convent, but that was not suitable for a princess. She must obey her father's will as if it were the will of God. Women had to be especially careful to do the will of God because it was through a woman that mankind had fallen into original sin. And every woman must be aware that it was her work to atone for that original sin in Eden. So, and how many women live that way today? In religious circles, especially. After Guinevere's welcomed as Arthur's wife and queen, it appears she has 3 important commitments in her life. One is her love and loyalty to Christian values, as defined in the 5th century. The second is her duty to Arthur. The third is her love and loyalty to Lancelot. And unfortunately for Guinevere, the first 2 commitments utterly conflict with her third. Her commitment to the maintenance of the master narratives of pious Christian women and loyal wife of her king are in direct opposition to her commitment to Lancelot. And that's what determined the choices she would make. In fact, it drives her to madness, expressed in an increasingly fanaticism about Christianity. There's so much more here, and we're drawing close to the end of this show. We may have to extend this over into one more night. I was thinking of, even in Camelot, you've got that song at the beginning of Camelot where Guinevere runs away. She's being wed to the new king, Arthur. She's never met him. And she says, the song she sings is, she's praying out in the woods when she runs away. She says, Saint Genevieve, it's Guinevere, remember me. Saint Genevieve, I'm over here beneath this tree. You know how faithful and devout I am. You know that I have always been a lamb. But Genevieve, Saint Genevieve, I won't be bidden bargain for. I won't obey you anymore. You've gone a bit too far. I won't be bidden bargained for like beads at a bazaar. Saint Genevieve, I've run away, eluded them and fled, and from now on I intend to pray to someone else instead. And she says, oh, Genevieve, Saint Genevieve, where were you when my youth was sold? Dear Genevieve, Saint Genevieve, shall I be young before I'm old? And she sings the song then, where are the simple joys of maidenhood? Where are all those adoring, daring boys? Where's the knight pining so for me? He leaps to death in woe for me. Oh, where are a maiden's simple joys? And it goes on. I was looking, I've got a minute left. And she as she's praying, she says, can't I do this too? Shall 2 knights never tilt for me, and let their blood be spilt for me? Oh, where are the trivial joys, harmless convivial joys? Where are the simple joys of maidenhood? And she even sings in that song, "Can't I do this? Can't I do that? Can't I even start a little war?" And that's, of course, exactly what happens in the story. So this is her narrative in a more simplistic, in a musical way that Guinevere was locked into. She was locked into the narrative of not being who she wants to be. And this is what Morgaine was, until Marion Zimmer Bradley wrote the counter story, which said Avalon was the Isle of the Priestesses. And you know what? She researched this and studied this. She might not be too far off in her fictional storytelling. Folks, we got to go. It's the end of the show. Stick around. We'll have the captain's cabin afterward. And for now, you know what? Live long and prosper.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Okay, folks, we are off air, and I've got to stop the stream right now so others can pick it up over at the radio station. And boom, we are out. All right, there we go. All right, everybody, thank you for being here. Leslie Hoker, the most intelligent talk I've heard all day. Intrepid Radio, intelligent talk. There it is. So you're welcome, Deborah Sloan. Thank you. We'll stick around. You can stick around for a few minutes here. We sometimes go a few minutes, sometimes go a half an hour. And I think my wife went to bed. I think I missed her. So hang on a second. I'm going to go say goodnight and see you in a little bit. Hold on. Who's Dawn? All right, I'm coming back. Had to go say temporary goodnight to the woman. I'll see her in a little bit, but she'll be sleeping, I'm sure. As with most nights. All right, guys, I'm back. Roger Rabbit, good to see you. Yeah, it's good having Uncle Dave Potter here on Friday nights. We just kind of go. It's good conversation. That's conversation. Dave and I, you should see us when we have a little scotch. We're smoking a pipe, sitting in front of the fireplace in the library talking. That's what I want that to be like. That might become a regular gig as long as Uncle Dave's available. So thank you, Dave Potter, for saying it's a good show. Let the obscenities fly, goddammit. Sorry, Steve Clark. Yeah, if you might have missed it at the end of the show, we go dark and then we come back in for the captain's cabin. I just had to get up for a minute. I announced it. I got to go say goodnight to my wife. She didn't want to come and interrupt the show. She heard the whole show, though. She was sitting over there. And just now when I kissed her goodnight, I said, I'll be in a little bit. And she said, "Good night, my husband. I shall have breakfast ready for you at dawn." I said, "Who's Dawn?" So, yeah. Some of this is conversations based on things that Rainey and I have talked about. Trying to understand the narrative. And the narrative is strong. We don't realize sometimes just how strong the narrative can be. Roger Rabbit says, Scotty and Uncle Dave on Fridays for sure. It's a kitschy name. Oh, catchy. Kitschy works too. So, yeah, Uncle Dave, whenever you're available on Fridays, let's do that same thing. I think it's a great gig. By the way, folks, I'll probably announce this on air. If you're on my Facebook, you may have seen it. I talked about the possibility of us all taking a little trip up to see the original Star Trek sets that are rebuilt up in Ticonderoga, New York. And I arranged this with Russ Haslage. Well, actually, he arranged it with me and said, "Do you want to do this still?" And he made all the arrangements on it. It's set, if you look at your calendars, mark it on your calendars, Saturday. Is it a Saturday? It's September 24th. Let me call up my calendar here. September is the 24th, yes, is a Saturday. The 23rd is when the trip starts. So what this trip will involve is you got to get your butts to New York, Fort Ticonderoga. Not the fort, the town, Ticonderoga. And the fort is there too. We may stay over an extra day and go see the fort. You'll have to get your own lodgings, rent your own car. If you drive there, you don't have to rent a car. If you fly into like Albany or something like that, you'll have to rent a car. I think it's very difficult to fly right into Ticonderoga. So if you want to come along on that trip, you can, there's a website, and I put it on my Facebook. It's an easy website to remember, but I don't remember it at the moment. Let's see. The website is, you can go see StarTrekTour.com, StarTrekTour.com, and you can see some pictures of the sets. Now, what they did there, what did I just do? I turned on my YouTube while I'm talking on StreamYard. StarTrekTour.com. And what he has done, James Crawley, I think is the guy's name. He was doing Star Trek fan films. He's an Elvis impersonator, so he's got the hair, the Elvis hair. But one of his hobbies was rebuilding these sets, and he sunk his money into that. And it's not the same sets that they used for Star Trek Continues, which was one of the best fan film series that was out there, recreating the original series. But this is another set of sets. They took the original blueprints for the Desilu Studios, where they had the original, that's Lucy and Desi Arnaz. They had the studio where the original Star Trek was filmed, and they produced it at the beginning. And he took the blueprints and then took, of course, photographs and films and all of that, and meticulously rebuilt all the sets for Star Trek, the original series. And now it's an open tourist site. And I think it costs $38 for us to take the tour. And many times it's like William Shatner comes there once a year and does a gig there. It's like a lot more money to buy tickets for that one. They've got, you'll see if you go to the website, Star Trek Tours. It's either tours or tour.com. You'll be able to see some of most of the original cast that are left alive still come there. And of course, others from Next Generation even come there. And so the sets are amazing. And I have not been to them. I've been to Ticonderoga before, but it was, I think, before Crowley built the sets there. And we were there reenacting French and Indian War. Dave and I were part of the 42nd Royal Highlanders, French and Indian War, 1759. And Fort Ticonderoga, there was a big part of the French and Indian War. And so I've been there for that, but I have not seen these sets. So Rainey and I are planning on going. We may bring the kids. Flynn would love to see this. And I think the kids don't want to miss out when we do stuff like this. We might drive out there from here, which is a 21-hour drive, with the kids. And we're probably going to go meet Russ in Ohio on the way, then over to Fort Ticonderoga from there. So thanks, Romeldian. That's in September. You can come too. This is open to the public. if you want to come to this, you can contact Russ or through me, get to Russ, and he'll line it up for you. Dave says, maybe I should move the Wednesday trip to Friday, get there in the evening, have some kid time, and do the show. That would be fun if you came here. I'd just set up a chair over there with your own mic, and you can go. We don't have to sit on the same mic here. You could do it on your laptop, broadcast from your laptop. But I also have a second studio mic we could set up for you and a second cam. So we'll see. So Andy's probably going to be in Idaho, elk hunting. Oh, in September? That leaves you free to come with us, Leslie. So let's see. Barbara, are you pretty close to Ticonderoga? Am I seeing that in the discussion going on? Steve Clark says, if I drive there, I would have to head back early and crash a wedding of a friend in Maryland on the 26th of September, a couple of days later. Yeah. And Maryland's not too far as the crow flies from upstate New York, I don't think. It's all East Coast to me. So I think that would be fun to have everybody come out that wants to come out. When in September? 24th, 23rd, Friday the 23rd and Saturday the 24th, Dave. I can't remember which day we're touring the sets. It might be the 23rd that we're actually touring the set. I've got it on as the 23rd on my calendar. Let's see. September 24th. Saturday, September 24th. Beam there or beam square, so said Russ. And you can go to StarTrekTours.com. Or is it tour? Let me just see if it's singular or plural. StarTrekTour.com. I'm going to paste that in the chat room so y'all can see that. Boom, boom, boom. So if you go to that link, you'll be able to see what's there, the sets that they have built and everything. And they've done the whole studio as it was set up in the 60s for the filming of the original series. Let's see. I can make to the middle of Pennsylvania in 18 hours. That's cool. Yeah, it takes... we drove to Ticonderoga from Minneapolis way back in 2001 when we went to Fort Ticonderoga. And that took us 21 hours. But we were hauling trailers and had a couple of vans behind us. Some of our people flew, and then the rest, we hauled the trailer, and I think we had 2 vehicles that we drove out there with. So, 21 hours from Minneapolis, which is irrelevant to all of you unless you live in Minneapolis. So, would love to see you there. There you go. That's the announcement. Also, I didn't talk about it on the radio show tonight, but go get your book, The Sword in the Clay. Order your book at theswordintheclay.com. And that's as easy as the title of the book. There it is. If you want to order the book and you haven't done so, go ahead and order it. There's also the extra things that we offered as Kickstarter. You can purchase those too. And they're down below the main book purchase clicker. You'll see the row of things there. So go take a look at that. Thank you. Oh, I thought somebody else put it up. It was me. It showed up twice. It showed up on the Facebook and then here. So what do you think of all this stuff of master narratives? I think we get trapped in master narratives. I think this is something we've talked about before when we talk about Christianity. And I'm not casting any aspersions on Christianity. And I certainly don't want anybody to believe something different than what they believe. And I want to be sensitive to everybody's belief system here. But how much of what we believe is based on a master narrative that we were taught? And let's see. Get the autograph book. It's worth every penny. Thank you, Leslie. At theswordandtheclay.com. Thank you. And I think we get stuck in master narratives. And these master narratives kind of drive who we are and what we do and how we do things. And we have to find the way to either, sometimes the master narrative isn't bad, but sometimes we go along with master narratives that were set in place. And they might not be the best things for us. And then we start believing those things about ourselves. And sometimes we were raised in that master narrative. And so I mentioned the other day, I'm going to be writing a book. I just had a client hire me to, and I go out to meet with him on Wednesday to start the process, but writing a biography for something. They wanted me to ghost write an autobiography. And I'm fine with that, you know. Sometimes it sounds so mercenary, but if you want to pay me to write to ghost write and my name doesn't get put on it, I'm fine with that, as long as I get paid. And that's fine. But then he had said in our conversation, he said, there's no reason your name shouldn't be on this. How do we do that? I said, well, just say it's by your name with Scotty Roberts. Fantastic. He said, that's great. And so I'm going to be starting work on that this week. And that's a nice project to have coming in. And then I've also got to, in between there, I'll be finishing up How to Be an Archaeologist. And that's going to be coming out as soon as I'm done. That's going to be published by Little Platinum Books, Pierre Arnold, my friend. And so Leslie says, these days, the master narratives are spoon-fed by the propagandists in the media. Think for yourselves. That's it. Think for yourself. The problem with master narratives and thinking for ourselves, it's like Marion Zimmer Bradley writes about in The Mists of Avalon. Those characters were locked into these master narratives, and they didn't know any other way. This is the way it was supposed to be. Guinevere couldn't fall in love with and marry the man she wanted to marry because the master narrative said she had to do what her father told her she had to do. And there are some people that are like that. I mentioned the church, and I'm not trying to talk down about the church. I'm just saying what we have learned in the church, what we've learned in Christianity, there are master narratives there. And sometimes I would say that a master narrative can fall outside of a doctrine, outside of a theology. It's just the way things are done. This is the way we've always done it. My family has sat in this pew in this church for 4 generations. I'll be damned if someone else sits in this pew. It is my family's pew. It's tradition. It's the way it's always been done, kind of thing, So, good night, Steve Clark. Glad you're here. Thanks for being here tonight. We'll have a grand opening of this box of Blueberry Shine coming up very soon, sometime this week. Leslie said, I'll be happy to do that for you, Scotty. Religion is responsible for more pain and suffering than anything else. Isn't that the truth? Not spirituality, spiritual belief, but religion is. I believe that. And I've been there before, said Romeldian. Yep. I think a lot of us have been there in one form or another. And sometimes breaking free of the narrative, creating our own counter story. I think I should put that on a shirt. Create your own counter story. Don't follow the narrative. Scotty Blackberry Moonshine. That's right. And Steve, I hope you saw I've got the package here. One night this week, we're going to open that up and give the taste test on air. Hey, Michelle Canham-Free. McFree. Leslie says, I'm extremely spiritual. I just don't have to be connected to a religion for my faith. No, you don't. You don't. And I've really grown to eschew religion. It's not something I want to be part of anymore. Moves over your stuffed shirt. I sitting down, says Uncle Dave. Breaking free of old ways is hard to do, Romeldian says. Ain't that the truth, Romeldian? Sometimes we're so ingrained in the old way of doing things, the traditional way. It's like, I think that was an eye-opener for me, too. Not that I haven't thought about this in other aspects before, but when looking at this story of the Mists of Avalon and looking at the characters and how Marion Zimmer Bradley wrote a counter story to the narrative, the master narrative. You look at marriage, even today, like I said during the show, marriage nowadays still has a lot of tendrils, at least in the Christian faith, for the most part. A lot of the tendrils of the old traditions that were traditions built in the old master narrative of ownership. Look at dowries and things like that. Now, we don't have dowries so much anymore. Some people do. It's still out there. Faith comes from within, says Leslie. Faith has to be something that you are so convinced of that nothing else can prove it different for you. That's why I say I struggle with faith, spiritual faith, religious faith. I have faith in things, obviously, that there's something greater than myself out there. By myself, I mean greater than us, greater than humanity, greater than who we are. I believe that. I believe there's a God. I believe there's a creator. I believe there's an originator. I believe about Jesus. I don't know what I believe about Jesus anymore. That's a tough one for me. And we've talked about this before, too, on this show. I can't throw that out, but I don't know what to believe about him anymore. Because most everything I was taught about him comes from a master narrative that we have no way of proving other than by faith. So, there you go. I'm going to leave that there. I just heard a door, or that must have been Flynn upstairs. Flynn? Flynn? Hang on, I heard a big bang upstairs, and I don't know if it's Flynn. I'll be right back. Is that you? Did you come in out of the... Did you close the big door or something? It sounded like the big sliding door slammed. And then I called for you and you didn't answer, so I thought, uh-oh. Something going on upstairs. Oh. Oh, see, she was barking after I heard the big slam. Just go make sure the sliding door's locked up there, will you? Hang on, folks.
What are you barking at?
Everything okay up there? Must be. All right. All right. Heard a big thump, and it was like the upstairs sliding glass door, which just goes out onto a balcony, not the ground. The sliding glass door down here goes out to the backyard. But I heard a big thump, and that's what I thought I heard, and I thought it was Flynn upstairs. And then the dog started barking. And then I said to Flynn just now, I said, "Were you just out on the?" He says, "No, I didn't come out. Came out of my room and I heard the dog barking. The dog started barking after I heard the big, what sounded like the sliding glass door. So I don't know. Nobody is in the house or anything like that. So I had to check that. Good night, Leslie. You got to hit the hay. Remember, try and get some sleep. Yeah. Good night, Scotty. Good night, all you amazing Intrepheads. Go get your book at theswordandtheclay.com. Thank you, Leslie. You have a good night too. And yeah, I'm gonna probably not go very much longer tonight. I'm gonna need to go to bed too. Rainey and I were talking about this yesterday. We've both been hit with just the big tired all the time. We're just dragging for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Dragon. And I have my moments where I feel great, but man, I'm telling you, well, everybody's down here right now in the little kids' room, and Rainey will probably fall asleep in there because it's late and it's very quiet. Flynn's upstairs. My room is up with Rainey. Rainey's in my room is upstairs, right next to Flynn's, because the kids all changed rooms a couple of weeks ago. So I don't hear any movement. I don't see her moving. So I might have the bed to myself tonight. So, yeah, and it's dragging. It's this dragging thing. And Rainey and I have both felt it. It's like, what the heck? And why are we so tired? Today, it just hit me. I was sitting here, I'm working, and I blink, that the hard blink, and you go, try to get your eyes open, and you go, I just fell asleep, I think. And I have that happened to me 2 or 3 times right here at my desk this afternoon. I said, that's it. I said to Rainey, I said, and she had to go do scouts. And I said, I'm sorry, you got to run again, but I got to go. I'm going to go sleep. I think I fell asleep for 2 hours this afternoon. So, but it's sad. I only sleep about 4 or 5 hours a night. My body just won't let me sleep. My brain won't let me sleep. I got so much stuff going on in my head. And I'm not too busy because I'm tired all the time. I don't like that. And I think I just don't sleep well, is what it comes down to. I was just going to check while I'm here because we have this app. I was going to show you this app. I might be doing just fine, but it's Fitbits. We got these, And like if I look at my sleep, my sleep score. Okay. So I slept for this afternoon. Let's see if I slept for 1 hour and 20 minutes this afternoon. Well, wait, it says 12:27 a.m. to 6:22 a.m. Oh, that was last night. So I went to bed at 12:30. I woke up at 5 hours and 26 minutes last night. And this tracks it all. It tells you what kind of sleep you're getting and all of that. Sunday was 4 hours and 56 minutes. And hour and 33 had to be sometime I fell asleep. But that's a neat little app. It helps you keep track of what you're doing. And you can see here you can see these little bars. See the bars? And it's got the red zones, the black zones, the peaks and the valley. It's a little fuzzy. But it tells you the kind of sleep you're getting. So like last night. Let's go back to this one on here that had all these red marks. Sunday night. That was either Sunday morning early or Sunday night. 4 hours and 56 minutes. 2 times I woke up. 5 times I was restless, 19 minutes awake and restless, 2:58 a.m. bedtime, 8:34 a.m. wake up. That was on Sunday. That's when I went out to feed the birds at 8:30. So about 6 hours. But it shows you all these, and there's the scale, for what's asleep, what's restless, what's awake. Flynn? Hey, Flynn. Wait a second. I think there's Rainey talking through she's got webcams around the house. She's talking through the webcam. Hold on a second. Upstairs. Rainey? Flynn, is that mom talking through the webcam? Or were you making too much noise? When you're in that kitchen, you gotta walk like a kitten, tenderly. All right, I'm coming up there pretty soon. Yeah, Flynn was making too much noise in the kitchen, which is over the kids' bedroom down here. And so Rainey was talking to him over the microphone on the camera. All right, anyway, that's my Fitbit. But I think I'm going to be taking off for the night too, guys. Bed sounds like a great idea. Let's see, Roger Rabbit. It's like the video left everyone slightly zombified. There it is. So, all right, guys. I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks for being here and continuing to be here. Spread the word. Let's get this, see if we can get this channel built back up after my 6 months away from it. We've been on air, and this is our 4th week, I think, now again, since we started broadcasting again, since October. So there we go. So, guys, have a good night. Thanks, Barbie D. That's all I got. I got nothing else. So you know what? Live long and prosper. And I will see you guys all, tomorrow night. Thanks for being here.